So, Tim, I'm going to hand the room to you. Yeah.
Kind of looking around and see if there was another Tim Caspers around here. There's no way I can live up to that. Wow.
Yeah, you already have, so there.
Wow, thank you. That was very, very gracious. Just a little bit about me. Been in ministry for about 35 years, and the last 19 was as a church planter and then lead pastor at Crosswinds Community Church in Stillwater. And best 19 years of my life. Just really have enjoyed the church, the people, what God has done. We are not a large church, and that's some of what I needed to. I talked to the Lord often over the years, on because when you start a church, you really want you want to go gangbusters. We never went gangbusters, but God taught me that you don't have to be a large church to be an effective church, and so we have been an effective church in the Stillwater area, and I'm really thankful to God for that. I've recently, my financial consultant told my wife and I that I am not retired, that I'm on sabbatical. So he said, "You still need to work, buddy." So I thought I was retired, but I'm not. So, boy, if you know of anybody that needs a part-time guy, let me know. But right now I'm just enjoying the summer and some time off, and it really feels good. I became convinced that the church accomplishes real mission and evangelism outside the walls of the church. And it's easy to say that, but pastors, I think, are fairly church-centric in their thinking. And we talk about evangelism, we talk about, really getting into our community, but we don't often lead that way. It took years for me to practically turn that around. And honestly, Crosswinds right now still is not where it needs to be. We still have work to do, so we have not arrived. And I am not an expert. I can only share, what our story is. But I am convinced that real mission is and real ministry is outside the walls of the church. So we have spent the last several years getting the focus of our church off of ourselves and into the community. And the vehicle for that is whole life discipleship, which we interchange several terms for that, and I'll share that in a second. But a long time ago, God transformed my heart, and I feel like I need to tell you the Crosswinds story a little bit before I talk about preaching. Okay, so I hope that's okay. My journey, God really nailed in my heart and my mind that the local church is about this: love God, love people to God. And I needed something simple because, that's just the way my mind works. I needed a handle. And so my handle is love God with my heart, soul, strength, and mind, love people, and love them well. And then love people to God because they are desperately lost without God in their lives. Now, that's not revolutionary, but it's something that's been shaping, my ministry for many years. And the scriptural basis for that, obviously, is Great Commission, Great Commandment. So go and make disciples, teach them to obey, baptize them, and remember the Lord is the Lord of His church, and He'll be with us in all of that. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I just centered on that in terms of my heart and my mind for local ministry. And one of the things that I had to do is to kind of get over myself. The church is not primarily what happens on Sunday. And so much of what I was doing was to make sure that Sunday went great. And I think we need to do that. Sunday does need, because Sundays are still, that main attraction every week, where if our people are really living out whole life discipleship, they there's a steady flow of people coming into the doors of your church on a Sunday morning. And so you need to introduce them in ways that really open their heart to the things of God. But I had to get over myself that the church is primarily not what happens on Sunday morning, though Sundays are certainly important, or Saturdays and Sundays, or whenever you do your worship. Francis Chan had an interesting interview that he did recently, and he stepped down from his church, Cornerstone, several years ago, which I remember at the time he did that, I go, what? I mean, he was just flying, right? Here's what he said: I got frustrated at a point, just biblically. According to the Bible, every single one of these people in the church has a supernatural gift that's meant to be used. And I'm like, 5,000 people show up every week to hear my gift, see my gift. That's a lot of waste. So I'm wasting the human resources of these people that, according to Scripture, have this miraculous gift, but they just sit there and listen to me. I was like, God, you wanted a church that was known for their love. You wanted a group of people where everyone is expressing their gifts. We're a body. I'm one member. Maybe I'm the mouth. But if the mouth is the only thing that's working, and then he went on to say that I'm just trying to drag the rest of the body along. And he became frustrated with that and wanted more. So, he's doing house churches now, interestingly enough. But and I think he's right. And I think what he got frustrated with was being church-centric, being a Sunday-only church. And then something that we discovered at Crosswinds, and Robert Oshevsky's here, he's on staff with me, really the impetus for us to do whole life discipleship. He's the one that introduced the idea to me, and smart enough to know that it probably, a house divided is not going to work, right? So Robert talked with me, and we looked at this, and then as a staff we talked about it, and finally really came to some conclusion about taking a path of whole life discipleship. And I'll tell you what that meant to us here in a second. But what we realized was that there's a Sunday-Monday chasm, a sacred secular divide among Christ followers who go to our churches, to our church for sure. Christians do Jesus on Sunday, but do they do Jesus on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday? Are they taking Jesus with them when they leave the church, into their homes, into their neighborhoods, into the workplace, into the community? Is Jesus still, that which primarily drives them? Are they thinking of themselves as Christians in mission when they leave the church? And we just came to the realization that some were, most weren't. Some were, most weren't. And we wanted to be able to say most of them are, and others are on their way. And so we knew that we had to do some things differently. Our realization was this: it's not about getting bigger on Sunday mornings, although Lord, bring the increase. That's fine. Whoever you bring us, we're going to try to unfold. But really what we believed it was getting better at disciple making. So not growing bigger, but getting better at disciple making. Followers of Jesus, reproducing themselves in the lives of other people. And you can't do that if you're primarily church-centric. So were our people seeing themselves really reproducing themselves in the lives of people that they see every day, that they rub shoulders with throughout the course of their day, throughout the course of their week, month, and year. Synergistic numerical growth, we felt, occurred only as Christ followers are active representing Jesus in their everyday lives. That synergy thing, that momentum, any pastor that has seen growth understands momentum. And it's elusive. You can't sit down and say, hey guys, as a staff, let's gain some momentum. It's like, okay, you tell me how to do that. But we think the best way for momentum is just the idea of multiplication, right? I mean, we know how multiplication works. It's when other Christ followers are touching the lives of people who need Jesus, and they respond to that, and then they come to church, and they're fed, and they're enfolded into the community of the church, and then they start telling their friends, and they start coming. We know how it works. But we realize that the only way to get that done is if we're sending people out representing Jesus to people around them. And if you're not, for us, if we weren't doing that well, we were not going to find momentum or synergy. At least that's how we felt. Now, God brings momentum and synergy to churches in other ways too. But I think in terms of disciple making, I think we came to that conclusion that was our answer. So it's not about being Sunday-centric. It's about being people and community-centric as we send followers of Jesus out. So, the whole go and make disciples, there's really something to that. It's not go to the four walls of a church and make disciples. In fact, that really doesn't, that really circumvents the work of the Holy Spirit. So our solution, we came, this is really cutting kind of to the chase, but to train Christ followers to prayerfully represent Jesus to those that they rub shoulders with every day. We realized that we had to firm up our vision of being a whole life disciple-making church, train people to capture that vision, and then to prayerfully represent Jesus every day. We wanted to equip our people to be truth-telling, love-giving practitioners of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Practitioners. It's easy to talk about Jesus, on a Sunday morning or in a small group. Not as easy when you're talking with neighbors or you're in a coffee shop in your community or when you're in the workplace and you have a job to do. So we wanted to equip people to understand how to represent Jesus in all of those contexts. And so we started with emphasizing living out faith at work. That's really where it started. And about that time, even before that, we asked Teddy Ann to come to help us organize ourselves. She's really good at that. If you need some organization and somebody to facilitate all of this, she really does it well. So she came in and helped us strategize on how to get all of our leadership together. She was wise enough to say, if only staff is swallowing this, forget about it because it's not going to go anywhere. So you got to get your leaders on board, and then once you have your leaders on board, you have to come up with a shared vision on strategy on how to cast that vision with your people and to keep it in front of them. So we went through a lot of work with that, and to get everybody on the same page, so that we could eventually get to equipping the church where Christ followers live the majority of their lives. They're representing Jesus well. So we had to prepare leadership. And so we ask ourselves questions like, okay, if we want to be a whole life disciple-making church, did our core competencies support a ministry paradigm shift? And Teddy Ann helped us even identify what our core competencies were. And it ends up that we had, really the stuff, the DNA of our church to do this, which was good news, because if you don't, if you're in a real established church, you might have to even go a little further, because very established churches, and I pastored two of them, they're so into their church family that they have, in many ways forgotten, except for missions, forgotten what it means to be a community-based church. So sometimes you really have to spend more time turning that ship. But we had our core competencies led us to understanding that we could do this paradigm shift. Did we need a renewal of mission, vision, and values? Yes. We were still operating off of the vision that I cast 19 years ago. So Teddy Ann said, what? So,
I think I said, we might have already gotten there. Now what?
Yeah. So she really helped us go back, and We ended up keeping some of the stuff that, that we built our church upon, some of that vision, but then identified, some new areas, and that was exciting, actually. So we worked through that. Took about 8 months of leading leaders, but that's well worth the time, and that's in a 19-year-old church. And so, if you're an older church, it may take more time, maybe not. Secondly, so first we had to prepare leadership. Secondly, we asked ourselves, how do all Christ followers represent Jesus? Not just a few. So we want all of our people to represent Jesus wherever they go, where they spend the majority of their time, not just in the workplace. And so this is where we started to move. We embraced faith at work. We embraced that because so many of the principles crossed over into all that we want to do. But we know that we had people in our church that weren't in the workplace every Sunday. We had housewives that were managing their homes and doing a great job. How do we challenge them? They're not in the workplace. And so if you only talk workplace, they don't catch the full vision of being a whole life disciple-making church. And so, how do people who are not in the workplace represent Jesus? So where are they at every day in doing that? Who are they rubbing shoulders with, and how do we equip them? So we expanded our vision into something that we called frontline ministry, and that was not original with us, but we sure liked the understanding. It came actually out of the book Fruitfulness on Your Front Line, Making a Difference Where You Are by Mark Green. He's a British guy, and really LICC, London Institute
Contemporary
for Contemporary Christianity, and really good stuff. So, and I think I gave a link for that. So we started really talking about frontline stuff, and we identified 4 platforms for our people to represent Jesus using the whole of their lives: home, neighborhood, workplace, and community. And because we realize that we're talking to just about everybody in our church when we're saying your job, your mission, what God has called you to do is to take Jesus with you, to represent Jesus to people in these 4 areas. And that covers just about everything. And yes, it's kind of a handle, but it really helped us share the vision, because people could identify with that, because they know what they do with their day and where they're at. So we really concentrated on that. We called all of that whole life discipleship, emphasizing representing Jesus with the whole of our lives, wherever we're at: home, neighborhood, workplace, community, our front line. Our disciple making strategy was to equip people for each of those platforms. And we're still not there yet. No, I'm not there, so maybe they've accomplished that this summer.
Yeah, in the month you've been gone.
Yeah, right.
Right, Robert.
So good work, guys. That's really good. But so our strategy: equip people for each of those platforms. Equipping stay-at-home moms to represent Jesus well in their home and neighborhood, their primary front line. Equip those in the workplace environment. So there's equipping that needs to take place that is specific to each of those platforms that we want to do. And so we're actually in that equipping phase at Crosswinds. Okay, so all of that to set up, how in the world was I going to, and in my part of it, Robert had his part too, because Robert took the everything outside of preaching. Robert was facilitating, and so he could probably tell this story even better than I could. So, but from my perspective, from preaching, I wanted to leverage the pulpit. Because if you're a preaching pastor, I think you understand kind of where your preaching goes is where the church is going to go, and that's not that's not say, hey, look at us, but that's just the way it works, and God has called us to do that. So I wanted to leverage the pulpit to unfold this whole life frontline vision into the fabric of Crosswinds, although that was just one of our approaches to equip. So the pulpit was not the only way, but I wanted my preaching to emphasize a lifestyle change. I really did want to call people to change. I wanted them to see that how we were living life was really not what God had called us to do. That if we're church-centric, if Sunday mornings or whenever we do worship and fellowship or small groups, if that was our primary expression of our Christianity, we were far off from where Jesus called us to do in the Great Commission. So I wanted to emphasize the lifestyle change, but I didn't beat on that. I didn't say you got to change, you got to change. There's a more subtle approach. Whole life discipleship needed to become, I knew that it needed to become a fixture in the heart and fabric and lifestyle of the church's mindset. So what we're trying to change is the mindset and the sense of mission. And also we started using different language so that a common language. And it wasn't long, really, and I think Teddy Ann and Robert, you can testify to this, but we would hear these side conversations about people talking about their front line, and it was really interesting. People picked up on that. So it was fairly successful, and I think because they liked that we had brought it to a point of where they could really grasp it. And for those that really want to make a difference, boy, that spoke to their hearts. But it took 2 years of introducing and cementing vision, and then it just goes on, because any vision that's worth touting is worth keeping in front of people. But I use terminology and principles that Crosswinds could relate to. So, what I didn't want to do is to take the material out there, and by the way, there's plenty of material out there on whole life disciple making. I didn't want to take it and just parrot. I needed to exegete, you talk about exegeting the text. I had to exegete our church family. Who are we? What do they understand? Where are they at? How can I introduce this in ways that they understand? And so, we tried to do that, and at the same time, use the material that's out there, so I wasn't reinventing the wheel. We just had to make it our own, and I think we did a pretty good job with that. So I took information available to me of whole life discipleship, representing Jesus on the front line, taking faith into the workplace, and I brought it all in the context of our church family. So, I kept asking myself, who are we? Where are we at? Where's the church family at with the idea of practicing the Great Commission and the Great Commandment? How are we seeing progress? And we would introduce new ideas and different approaches that kept saying the same thing over and over and over. And that was good. I want to say that one of the things was I never mentioned evangelism in this, though know that really this is all about evangelism. But I never mentioned it because, I don't know about your churches, but at Crosswinds, if I started talking about evangelism, let's evangelize, they would have tuned me out. Because evangelism is scary. But if I said, how do you think that you can represent Jesus at home or in your neighborhood? And then give them ways to do that and teach them, what are the possibilities? How can you represent Jesus at work? What does that even mean? And in your community. So part of that was, and we had people that were started to take positions in the community to be involved. We had one guy that got involved with the Washington County mental health stuff because he had an interest in that area. And others that just were plugging in. We had one member in our church that is on a school board now. So different people that are kind of getting the tentacles of Christ into the everyday fabric of our community. And I think it's because they started to take this kind of stuff seriously. But I never mentioned evangelism, though, I talk more about obedience to the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. Is that really who we are? Well, let's do it. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to get into our front line and make a difference. So what did the preaching consist of? I gave you just a sample that's available to you, and I think Tessa said it's in your notes that although you have to do a lot of typing to get there, but they're available to you. And so It's and I write out all my I call them life lessons, but I write them all out so you get all of my ramblings, and then the graphic work that we had done with each of those, and yep. And so I think there are 4 series on there. But one of the first series I did was Imagine Life on the Front Line. So I wanted them to get thinking about what would happen if you really represented Jesus on your front line. And then we had, help people identify, what is your front line? Where's that at? Where do you spend the majority of your day every day? That's primarily your front line. But you all have a home. Most of you have a neighborhood, and you're all in a community. So really, it's all 4. But so imagine your life on the front line. That was a 6-part series. That was fun. And then I did one called Marketplace Impact. That was more about influencing your community, but actually I've talked about all 4 of those platforms again. Did one, as Teddy Ann said, that we did in connection with a video series that we presented, Reframe Connecting Faith with Life. That was a 10-part series, and I gave you that as well. And then The Art of Neighboring, which is the last series that I did at Crosswinds. And that's kind of a fun one, because that one ended up by asking people to sign up to do a neighborhood gathering, a neighborhood block party, yeah. And so we had some people sign up. We also asked people to sign up if they wanted to be a part of a team that would actually join our advancement team, which is missions and local outreach. And they would just concentrate on frontline ministry and thinking about how to do that practically. So we actually got a team of people that said yes to that during that series. So now we're going to have hopefully more imaginations working on how to do frontline ministry as the fabric of our church. For the last 2 years, I think I mentioned something about whole life discipleship or frontline ministry in every life lesson that I did. Somehow, we just, and I learned something, because honestly, I think I was pretty weak at that years previous. We had cast vision, and then, the leadership might get it, but I wouldn't talk about it that much from the pulpit. And I think as pastors, we really need to leverage the pulpit in order to keep vision in front of people. And just a reminder, I didn't always do that well. I think one of the reasons why this was cemented pretty well at Crosswinds is because we did Sunday mornings and then other areas. Now, the reinforcement of frontline vision outside of preaching, we did publications and announcements and small groups and Sunday educational hour, and we used all of those other platforms that we had, and we used those to get the word out. And you have to use all of those, because if you have all of your engines running, and they're all saying the same thing, people are going to get it. It takes coordination to do that, but that's just working with your leadership and making sure that they get it and they're using that. But keep vision in front of people other than in worship. We did something, again, not new with us, but I think it's been successful and I really like it. It's called This Time Tomorrow, TTT. So when we do our Sunday morning worship schedule, and we put that together every week, I'm kind of excited when I see TTT up for that morning. This Time Tomorrow, and many of you are familiar with that already, but we just call somebody up that represents their front line, and even if they're not doing it great, we invite them up anyway, because when they start thinking about it, they can find something that God is doing. So, but we ask them 3 questions. What are you doing this time tomorrow? And inevitably, somebody's doing something at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, or on a Monday morning, right? So what are you doing Monday morning at 10 o'clock? And then we ask the question, how do you see God moving where you're at? And then the third one is, how can we pray for you? And what that does, it's not only interesting to hear from people, but it keeps, again, the vision out in front that, guess what? It's Sunday today, and we're having great fun in here in worship, and we love Jesus. But tomorrow's coming. And how are you representing Jesus tomorrow? Okay, this time tomorrow. Yeah.
And we all pull our phones out
Yeah.
and we put an alarm.
Yeah. To
So-
pray.
So,
Yep. So then, yep. And so we ask people now, remember, this time tomorrow, Joe Blow is going, he's going into an important meeting. So, at 10 o'clock, so at 9:50, you start praying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And we've had people that do that. So, that's a good one. So, and then we promoted stories of those living the vision. So if you can get stories, I was at Calvary. I've been going to your church.
Welcome.
Yeah. Great.
I better do this stuff.
Yeah. I'm just sitting back and I'm just enjoying. So
Okay, guys, so that
don't worry about me.
You just outed yourself.
Yeah. But we had a great story at Calvary this week of a woman from your church family that whose life has been transformed because she works in the area of prayer, and then you look down there and she's leading prayer at the end of the service. Just so good. And stories are powerful, and if you can capture them on video or do them live, but they are powerful. You have to coach people a little bit, but they're worth doing and worth doing well. So I gave you a number of resources that I used in the preaching thing. Like I said, there's a lot. Tom Nelson is really good. I do want to give a plug for Teddy Ann and Tessa and the whole work with faith at Bethel and work with purpose, and really good stuff. I mean, Robert first started going to some of that, but after we started, I don't know if we missed too many of the guest speakers that you had come in. Tom Nelson was one of the best, really good. Evangelical Free Church pastor, and wrote the book Work Matters, and that's a wealth of information that you can use for preaching. He also works with the Center for Faith and Work, so I gave you a link to that. Gospel Coalition, Theology of Work, For the Life of the World, really good. If you have not shown For the Life of the World in some kind of context in your church, find it and show it. It is really well done and takes this whole life discipleship thing and really brings it into focus. So, and even The Art of Neighboring, the last series I did, man, there is so much stuff out there. It's like I still, you could go forever. The only thing is make it your own.